Hi, this is Alan. I'm here when you need me.
Okay, we're waiting for Mr. Dixon to unmute his microphone, see if he needs any help.
Okay, so primegov dot what?
It's okc.primegov.com
Okay.
/login.
And I'm on there now using my email address. You notated as my username. What is the password?
I cannot see your password, but I can reset it if you would like.
Yeah,
and
that'd
I
be
can
great.
email it to you right now.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Who's
Sure.
in?
One of Mr. Thompson.
Santonio's in. Okay, cool. Mr. Dixon, have you tried *6 to unmute your phone? And Mr. Thompson, you look good. You're in PrimeGov, so you're all ready to go. And Mr. Chairman, you do have quorum as soon as we get Mr. Groves and Mr. Dixon set up.
Very good.
Yeah, man.
And there's Jim.
There's Steve
Luhar.
Dixon. We'll call you.
There you are, Mr. Dixon. Very good.
Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, just in time.
Francis will be proud.
Yes, I am proud of all of you. Now, I just want to, if there are any committee members in attendees, would you please raise your hand so we can move you over to panelists?
Sorry, wait, if there's any what?
If there are any committee members
Yes.
in attendees, there's someone with a phone number 881-5717. I don't know who that is. Okay, no one raised their hand. Okay, is Jeffrey in?
I am logging in right now.
Okay, Jeffrey's getting in, and then we'll be set. And just to let you all know, this PrimeGov is not a temporary platform. This is you're going to use PrimeGov when you're back in the council chambers. So it's important that you get the feel of it before we go back to in-person meetings.
Mr. Groves, once you log in, you'll see the city seal in the top left corner, and you'll want to go to meetings where it says meetings and committees. Drop down to choose the live meetings option.
So all I'm seeing is it shows the dashboard and then a drop down menu on the left. I don't see the city. There's the city seal. I'm sorry. So go down to live meeting.
Yes, that's right. Choose live meeting, and then you'll have to sign in again with the same email and password.
Okay. And then just click on our meeting.
That's correct.
All right.
You are in.
Sorry. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Groves. And just a hint, when we pull up the screen to start voting, remember to press escape or hit your Chrome button and your icons to vote should pop up.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, we're ready when you are.
Very good. Good morning, board. Thank you everyone for being here. You pre-meeting announcements. Thanks for joining us for the City of Oklahoma City Video Conference Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Advisory Board meeting. As you're aware, during the state of emergency in place during the COVID-19 pandemic and in compliance with state and local stay-at-home orders, no physical location will be provided for this meeting. The meeting will instead be live streamed from remote locations. We want to remind everyone that you have arrived in our virtual meeting. We have muted your mic. We have a few announcements to make regarding the virtual meeting. If the video conference is disconnected at any time during the meeting shall be stopped and reconvened once the audio connection is restored. If communications are unable to be restored within 30 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be continued to Monday, August 10th at 10 a.m. via teleconference. Anyone wishing to speak about an agenda item or public hearing or to speak under citizens to be heard, please call 405-297-2406 or email markmishu@okc.gov. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to comment. When you call in, staff will be monitoring, when you call in, staff will be muting your line. Please keep your lines on mute until you are recognized to speak. To unmute your phone, press star six, excuse me. We ask all participants except the board members keep their lines on mute until they are recognized to speak. Board members will be allowed to ask questions or comment at any time during the meeting. Please remember that only one person can be heard at a time. If more than one person speaks, we will not hear you both. For anyone speaking today, including board members, please identify yourself when you begin to speak. The agenda and documents discussed in this meeting are located in okc.gov. At this point, we will call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Is that correct, Francis?
You are correct.
Thank you. We will start our meeting right now. Thank everyone for being here. The first item of business is to approve the minutes from our last meeting of July 6, 2020.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from July 6th, 2020.
Thank you.
I'll second.
It's been
Okay.
moved. And
Please make your motions in Prime Gov to move in second, please.
I don't have, it says voting not available. I'm still waiting. I'm not sure if others are.
Yeah, mine says the same.
Okay, let's do a voice vote. That was moved by Jim Luha and seconded by, who seconded the motion?
Sandino Thompson.
Thank you. Some motion and a second. Mr. Chair, you want to call for all in favor?
Do we need
Voice.
to do individual? Do we need to do
Yes,
individual?
roll call vote.
Roll call? Okay.
Mr. McKnight,
Aye.
Mr. Johnston,
Aye.
and Mike Taylor is absent. Anthony Carfon is absent.
I'm
Jeff
here.
Groves?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Groves,
Aye, I approve.
Mr. Luhu, Jim,
Yes, I approve.
Ms. Dahlgren,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
is Mr. Noble here? And Mr. Dixon.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next items for consideration. 3A is street resurfacing projects, status update.
Good morning. This is Mike Clark with the City of Oklahoma City Public Works Department. Thank you for joining us for the August meeting of the Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Advisory Board. We would again like to thank our incredible staff for organizing the meeting and getting us all logged in. Several of our team are out today, but as always, we will do our best to provide any resources you find helpful. If we don't immediately have the information you need, we will research it and get back to you. In today's meeting, you will be asked to consider the next rounds of budget givebacks that have resulted from projects being completed and finally accepted. You will also be presented with a residential resurfacing budget revision request that has implications to both the resurfacing and bicycle infrastructure categories. And finally, we are returning to the discussion started last month on the distribution of revenue collections beyond the original projection. If there are no immediate comments or questions, I will move to item 3A1, the status update for resurfacing projects. To date, the board has recommended and City Council has approved 112 arterial resurfacing projects and 20 residential resurfacing projects. As depicted on this slide in your presentation, these totals represent 97% and 96% allocations of the available funding for the two roadway classifications. Lakeisha and Melinda will provide updates on the other Better Street, Safer City categories in a minute, but I will point out that street enhancement and sidewalk allocations both stand at 97%, trails is at 91%, and bicycle infrastructure is currently allocated at 72%. I did not include photos in your presentation, but an updated map for resurfacing projects is provided. In general, work continues to move forward in the resurfacing category. Despite there being ample competition for resources in and around the metro area from a combination of private development, other municipalities, ODOT, and the Turnpike Authority, contractors are accepting new projects and assigning crews accordingly. While we might like to see work progress more quickly, we are probably seeing the upper limits of the local labor pool and have throughout the life of the Better Street, Safer City program. We continue to have a steady stream of projects reach completion and move to City Council for final acceptance. Moving to item 3A2, we are presenting a second round of budget closeouts for you to consider. This batch includes one of the trails projects in addition to arterial and residential resurfacing projects. Looking at the list, There are 3 projects that need to have funding added to their budgets before being closed out, while there are 41 other projects that return funding to the category for future reallocation. The total amount to be returned and reallocated is $9,155,338.49. If there are no questions, I would ask for your recommendation on the budget closeouts.
This is an action item that requires a vote.
Al, it's still showing voting not available. Is anybody else experiencing that?
Yep, same here.
Yes.
Okay, we'll have a motion and a second and then roll call vote.
Steve Dixon, make a motion to approve.
Jason Johnston, second.
Mr. McKnight,
Aye.
Johnston,
Aye.
Taylor, Carfang,
Aye.
Groves,
Aye.
Lou, Jim,
Aye.
Dahlgren,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Noble, and Dixon.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Item 3A3 is a second budget revision request for PR1 1819, which is a residential resurfacing project in the square mile bordered by Reno, Northwest 10th, Penn, and Western. This is an older, largely industrial area constructed primarily of concrete. We have found the area to be generally in poor condition, and in addition to extensive roadway reconstruction, we have been required to replace a large number of drive and alley approaches to achieve ADA compliance. One of the approved bicycle infrastructure projects is general purging from May Avenue to Dewey. Moving from west to east, general purging transitions into Main Street at Pennsylvania, and Main Street then runs through the heart of PR1 all the way into downtown. We had hoped to be able to have PR1 resurface the mile of Main between Penn and Western to create not only a smooth driving surface, but a safe bicycle facility as well. However, we have found significant drainage problems throughout the entire mile section, and we believe additional funding is necessary to rebuild storm sewer inlets, grates, and reset curb and gutter. The budget increase anticipated to be necessary to complete PR1 as described is $1.7 million. In evaluating the new budget estimate, staff found a budget of $13.3 million for PR1 to be consistent with the cost to complete square mile residential resurfacing projects in other areas of Oklahoma City. I would be happy to try to answer any questions before requesting your consideration in recommending the PR1 budget revision.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions for Mike? This requires a vote.
Johnston.
Move to approve.
Okay, thank you. Roll call vote. McKnight,
Aye.
Johnston,
A.
Taylor, Carfang,
Aye.
Groves,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Dahlgren,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Noble, Dixon.
Aye.
Motion passed.
The slide that Mark has shared with you demonstrates the changes that occur in the arterial and residential resurfacing categories following today's action. You'll note that the arterial allocation has fallen back to 89%, while the residential allocation remains at 96%. We anticipate bringing a new list of arterial streets to your next meeting for possible funding consideration. Thank you again. I will ask Lakeisha Dunbar from our planning department to guide you through items 3B through D, street enhancements, sidewalks, and bicycle facilities.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, board. This is Lakeisha Dunbar, Transportation Program Planner from this planning department. And I will be presenting on items 3B, starting with 3B1, street enhancement projects. And for the status for both the street enhancement projects, the sidewalk projects, and the bicycle facility projects, not a lot has changed in the status of the projects and the percent completion for these projects, but I will give just a brief overview of a couple of items. Beginning with the Auto Alley project, authorization to negotiate a contract with Smith Roberts Baldishweiler, or SRB, was approved by council on July 7th. The Paseo and Walker projects, staff has reviewed and is coordinating communications with the Paseo District on the findings of the rain garden report, and staff has continued to work on establishing a streetscape maintenance agreement with the district. For the Northwest 39th Street area project, staff has reviewed and returned comments on the 90% plans that were submitted last month. Currently, we are coordinating on the options for 1% for the art component for the project, and the consultant is working on the details of the schedule to determine if the project construction can be completed before Pride in June of 2021. And then lastly, for the street enhancement projects, I'd like to say that for the Plaza Street Enhancement Project, the consultant has conducted site inspections and communications on their findings, and are reporting those communications to staff. And then for the remaining street enhancement projects, the 10th in Vermont, the Northeast 23rd from Kelly to Miramar project, the Stockyards project, the Meridian project, and the Northwest 10th project, and then the Portland project from 23rd Street to 36th Street. There is no significant change from the July meeting to report on at this time. Are there any questions on our street enhancement projects?
Lakeisha, this is Tony Carthang from Ward 2. Do you have a date or an idea of when the Paseo community meeting might be held with regard to the rain garden presentation?
I do not have an status on that at this time, but we will be sure to make sure that you are informed of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time on the street enhancement projects? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to move on to the next item, which is item 3C1, sidewalks, and the status update there. Next slide, please. Again, there's no significant change in the percent completion of the sidewalk project since the July CNEAT meeting. However, I would like to say that planning staff has been in continued communication with Embark on the opportunity to coordinate on the installation of ADA accessible sidewalk and bus stop pads. Embark recently celebrated a milestone on the installation of 100 new ADA accessible bus shelters. And these were all installed within the last year since July of 2019. I would like to tout that some of those shelters were installed likely at locations that were improved by the Seal Stacks sidewalk funding. And in addition to sidewalk projects, but also for the street enhancement project, staff has been requiring the project plans and designs to include ADA accessible upgrades for all existing bus stop locations that fall within the scope of each project. So that means that pads have been installed at all bus stop locations where feasible, so that they could eventually receive a bus shelter if desired by, installation is desired by Embark. And then as part of the Maps for Transit project, it is planned that over 500 additional shelters with security lighting and ADA compliant sidewalk connections are planned. And Embark has been utilizing the Bike Walk OKC plan, transit priority locations, to begin identifying where some of those locations may be. So we'll continue to coordinate with Embark, particularly also as we move forward when we look at the remaining list of projects or locations as it relates to the consideration for the excess collections of funding. That'll be also part of the conversation going forward. So that is my my status update regarding our sidewalks for item 3C. Are there any questions at this time regarding sidewalks?
Hey, Lakeisha, Tony Carfin from Ward 2 again. Since you mentioned the bus stop aspect, I noticed something in the news this past week. I can't remember exactly where, but it's becoming a little bit more prominent to see green roofs on top of bus stop shelters. Just some medium to tall grasses just on top of the bus shelter, and it provides extra cooling as well as air cleaning properties. And so I just thought that was pretty neat, and might be worth investigating if that might work in our climate.
Okay. All right, I'm sure we can share that information with the Embark, with COTPA and the Embark department, and see if they have any ideas or consideration for coordinating those designs with their current designs. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments regarding the sidewalk project status? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to move on to item 3D1, bicycle facilities. Next slide, please. So for our bike project status, beginning with the Walker Avenue project, again, I'd like to remind you, this was not originally a sales tax project, but this is one of those locations where we did work to coordinate the implementation of our striping for our bicycle facilities with a funded resurfacing project. So I'd like to continue to report on its status at this time. And I'd like to say that the work order for striping and delineators was issued for the Walker Avenue project on July 8th, and that work has commenced. And then the general purging project from May to Penn work order for striping and delineators was issued on July 31st. For the Lottie, for the next two projects, at last month's meeting, I was asked about the construction timeline for bike projects. And so we are expecting that the Lottie Avenue project and the Chartel project would be the next two projects that would begin construction, likely upon completion of the Walker project and the general purging project. So the Lottie project is designed at 90%, and is ready for construction. And the Chartel project is designed at about 80%, but we expect that it will be completely designed and ready for construction. It's a very small project, and we see that as likely being the fourth project on the list to begin construction. The Spring Lake Avenue project was the next project that is progressed the most at 90% design, and we're coordinating with Metro Tech for the portion of the project that extends from MLK to Prospect, and we're coordinating there. The coordination includes resurfacing of the roadway, and there are a couple other infrastructure requests that has been made, and so the city is coordinating with Metro Tech on how to best efficiently accommodate their needs with the funded projects. And we are looking to probably phase the remaining construction of the Spring Lake project which would likely begin with painting the bike lane portions from MLK to bike lane portions, from Prospect to Kelly, and then from Kelly to 36, from 36 to 23rd, and then 23rd to 13th. So let me repeat that. We will likely phase this project, the striping of this project, which will be phased from Prospect to Kelly, and then from Kelly at 36, and then from Kelly at 36 to 23rd Street, and then from 23rd to 13th Street. And the phasing is due to the type of facilities that we're looking to install. Likely it will be bike lanes on the portion from Prospect to Kelly, and then mainly sharrows on the portions from 36 to 23rd and 23rd to 13th Street. For the Main Street project, which is from Penn to Lee, that project is at 90% design, and staff is working to coordinate with the adjacent businesses regarding on-street parking options. The next project to likely follow would be the Indiana at Glenwood project, which is at 90% design. And we are currently waiting for the ordinance amendment to allow for parking protected, or also known as curbside bike lanes. We're coordinating with the municipal counselor's office on trying to amend the ordinance to allow for parking protected bike lanes. And we are looking at this project, we're considering it as a pilot project for these type of bike lanes. And so, and we're also likely looking to modify the scope of this project to extend it where it originally is to end at Chartel, but we like to extend it an additional 3 blocks over to the Walker Avenue project, and that is as a result of a request from local developers. The Villa North project and the Independence and Grand projects are currently slightly on hold right now, again, as they're being coordinated with the BRT project. And it has been determined that these projects will have to be formally advertised in order to meet the federal regulations as it relates to FHWA in order to utilize the funds as local match for the BRT. And then the 25th Street project is at 50% design, and that project too, we're waiting on coordination for on-street considerations for what will need to happen for on-street parking. And then the Villa North, the Villa Central project and the Wilshire projects are on hold. The Villa Central project is still continuing to be on hold as we are working to coordinate with the Stockyards project, street enhancement project. And then the Wilshire project, we're looking to confirm the scope for that project and working to identify additional funding for that project. And lastly, we have the 59th Street project, and I'll be discussing that in just a few minutes in more detail. And then I'd like to let you know that some of these projects may be brought back for budget recommendations as we continue to discuss on how to utilize the excess collections. So before we move on to the presentation for the 59th Street project, are there any questions on our bike project status?
So Tony Carfing again from Ward 2. I've got a bit of a list, so if anybody else has comments and wants to go first, go ahead. If not, so with regard to Lottie and Chartel at 90 and 80% designed, I know on Chartel in particular, the tree canopy, especially through the median, presents some visibility challenges for turning traffic that might obscure, say, a turning car's view of a cyclist in a bike lane. Would it be possible to see some of the renderings of the 80% design just to potentially have some input on that?
And please let me remind you that the Chartel project, the original scope of that project is for the on-street bike facility it'll be the new portion to be installed north of 50th Street. So this is, the designs are really only to be looking at the portion that will start just north of 50th Street where the CVS is, and to connect over to the Zachary Taylor Park and around to Bishop McGinnis School. And the goal here was to also, there's also funding in the sales tax bike category and also in the trails category to accommodate the connectivity to the Deep Fork Trail. And so this portion here that is being designed will be just the on-road portion that will connect to the park and then eventually connect to, I believe, a bridge that will cross over the creek, the Deep Fork, and connect to the Deep Fork Trail. So we were not looking at making any modifications to the existing bike lanes south of 50th Street.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. Given the potential connectivity for recreational cyclists who love trails more than roads, and especially connectivity to Bishop McGinnis, just to have high school students actually comfortable to ride, I still wouldn't mind being able to see some of the renderings of what that design might look like.
Yes, of course.
And then with regard to, I think you said the Independence project is on hold because they are still evaluating what would need to be done with on-street parking there. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I was taking notes. Would you mind repeating that question, please?
Sure. I think it was the Independence/Grand project where you mentioned it's on hold to examine what needs to be done with the on-street parking.
No, sir. The Independence and Grand project is on hold because it is going to be utilized as local match with the coordination of the Northwest BRT project. It falls within the area. There's a portion it crosses the Northwest Expressway, and because it crosses Northwest Expressway, where the BRT will be going through, we were able to consider that project as local match for the BRT project. And because it is being considered that those funds will be utilized as local match, it has to follow the Federal Highway Administration, or FTA, sorry, the Federal Transit Administration design and standards and guidelines in order to qualify. And therefore, we will have to advertise the design of that project, whereas originally it was assigned to an on-call contractor consultant for the design. We will now have to go out to bid for the design on that project. So that is the holdup. That is the current status of that project.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Was it a different project that you mentioned on-street parking is being looked at?
So yes, there are a couple of projects that we're needing to coordinate with on-street parking. The Main Street project, which was what we're also calling the phase 2 of the General Pershing project, which extends from Penn to Lee, is a project that we are needing to meet with adjacent business owners regarding the on-street parking for that one. And then the 25th Street project is another project where we need to work through some concerns about potential for on-street parking there. And we're also waiting on the status of the ordinance amendments as it relates to not allowing on-street parking where bike lanes exist. So it's a combination of those things.
Okay, that makes sense. With regard to the existing on-street parking challenges, do we have an estimated idea of what percentage and of those parking spots are occupied and how often throughout the day they are, like parking meter counts or something like that?
We have done that level of analysis for the Main Street project. I don't recall the numbers on hand right now for the Main Street project. And basically it was a visual kind of observation based on Google and a couple of drive-throughs. We have not done any official counts or timings for on-street parking for that location, but we made observations through just a few drive-throughs and Google views only for that location. for the 25th, also for the 25th Street, we actually did do, staff did go out and did, I think it was a Thursday evening and a Saturday morning drive-through to do observations for on-street parking for the 25th Street. I don't recall what the numbers are right now and the actual locations. We did identify by block where we observed on-street parking, and we do have that recorded, and we can get that information to you.
Okay, I'd find that pretty useful. Thanks. And then with regard to the ordinance on parking protected bike lanes, I thought I had seen a judge's letter that the ordinance as written doesn't need updating. Did I misinterpret that?
What we had was what city staff has received is, it was not, I don't recall that it stated that we did not have to update it. I had that open just a moment ago. Sorry, I could refer to it, but I believe we can also forward you what the municipal councilors findings were on whether or not we needed to make a change to the ordinance or not. This planning staff's interpretation was that we did need to make a modification to 2 ordinances, one for the parking protected bike lanes, and then the other one is for the on-street parking. And so I can forward that finding to you.
Okay.
But our interpretation was that we did need to make modifications.
Okay, I think the phrasing I was thinking of in the municipal councilor's assessment was that in the existence of a bike lane to the right of parallel parking, the quote unquote curb would be received as the edge line for motor vehicle traffic. And so the white line of the bike lane would be essentially the quote unquote curb line for that ordinance, but not a big deal. Clarifying the ordinance is probably the right way to go anyway.
Yes, okay.
All right, that's it for me.
All right, thank you. Great questions. Are there any other questions regarding the status of our bike projects? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to move on to item 3D2, bicycle facilities presentation on the award of the Southeast 59th Street Bicycle Infrastructure Project for Surface Transportation Block Grant Urbanized Area Funding. So you may recall that this project was submitted to receive funding as part of our, I believe it's 11 bike projects. And the original scope of the project was to extend along Southeast 59th Street from Santa Fe to Air Depot. And the original allocation from the board was for $500,000. Next slide, please. In review of this project, it was determined that it may be very challenging to do the original scope of the project as an on-road bike facility from Santa Fe all the way over to Air Depot. So staff reviewed the project and modified the scope of the project to be along Southeast 59th Street front to extend from Eastern over to Air Depot, and then along Eastern from the Grand Trail down to Southeast 59th Street. 59th Street is currently 4 lanes and it's approximately 50 feet wide. And the ADTs, the average daily traffic, goes from about 8,700 vehicles just east of I-35, and averages around 5,000 to 6,000 as you head towards as you head towards Air Depot. Then the volumes jump up to about over 13,000 as you go west of the interchange at I-35, and they go somewhere close to about 16,000 as you approach Santa Fe to the west. Eastern is a 4-lane facility, and it's approximately about 48 feet wide, and the average daily traffic there is about 8,500 just south of 44th Street, and then it approaches about 11,000 or over 11,000 vehicles per day north of 44th Street. So I give you those statistics to kind of tell you why we looked at changing the scope of the project, particularly along Southeast 59th Street, because the volumes are above that threshold where we would like to start considering a project for a lane reduction from a 4-lane project down to a 3-lane project to receive bicycle lanes. And then the interchange at the highway would make it challenging for transitions there for a bike facility. So we decided to change the scope of the project to stop the project at Eastern and then take it up Eastern to the South Grand Boulevard Trail. Also, the other ideas, as you're looking at this map here, there's currently an existing trail on Sooner Road. The green line is solid coming down from the north, and it's the trail exists from 44th Street going north. But then we would like to look at a proposed trail going from 44th down to connecting to Southeast 59th Street. And then also we have a proposal to look at consideration of a trail going down South Air Depot to connect over to the Draper Lake Trail. Next slide, please. So annually, the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, also known referenced as ACOG, holds a call for projects to receive Surface Transportation Block Grant Urbanized Area, or STBGUZA, federal funding. And we here in planning also call it STBGUZA funding. In November 2019, the call for projects was for the 2021 through the 2023 federal fiscal year. And annually, planning identifies bike ped projects, and in collaboration with the Public Works Department, we work on looking at all types of projects to be considered for submittal. Planning scores all funded sales tax in 2017 bond projects, and then the city submits the highest ranked projects that we feel are most competitive. And then the projects are scored by project type. So the projects could be anything from a widening, new construction, intersection safety, bridge, resurfacing, transit, or bike ped. And then there's 100% safety category. So there's one category where we could submit projects for an 80-20 category, or there's 100% safety category where 100% of the funds would be reimbursable. And then the scoring criteria includes the top items such as economic strength, safety and security, equity and options, healthy communities, connectivity, system performance, and system preservation. Next slide, please. So for the 2021 federal fiscal year call for projects, the total available funds to be allocated by ACOG was just over $21 million. And of that, 19.4 was included in the 80-20% category. And of that category, only a 10% cap was set for the bike ped projects. So what that means is that of all the projects that were submitted, only 10% of the funding could be allocated to a bike ped project, regardless of who the municipality or agency, regardless of the receiving municipality or agency. And then of that 21.56 million, there was allocated 2.1 million for the safety category, and that's the 100% category. And then the maximum allowable per jurisdiction is 56%. So about 12 million is what one jurisdiction could possibly receive out of the $21.56 million. And every year, of course, the city of Oklahoma City strives to achieve that 56% allocation. And again, it is a very competitive process. And so the projects are ranked. Next slide, please. So last year, in November, staff submitted to ACOG the Southeast 59th Street project. It ranked 80 at 88.85. It had a ranking of 88, or it scored at 88.85. So it was the third highest project to score. And so we submitted the project for $2.98 million. And the project description was to include in the scope resurfacing, signal upgrades, sidewalks, and ADA accessible ramps. So I'll remind you that the project was originally allocated $500,000 by the CNEAP board, but we expanded the scope of the project so that we could include opportunities for resurfacing, signal upgrades, sidewalks, and ADA accessible ramps. Including these categories helped to make the project more competitive. Excuse me. And so, again, with the call, the top 3 ranked projects in the 80 to 20% category were from Oklahoma City, and the top 2 were top 2 projects were resurfacing projects, and then of course the third project was the 59th Street side bike ped project. And so this was just an opportunity for us to share with you how we are working to utilize our sales tax funding and other local funding in an effort to secure additional funding outside additional federal funding, kind of similar to the BRT opportunity where our bike ped projects were considered for local match there. So that is all I have for the presentation for our bicycle facilities on the Southeast 59th Street project and its award of the STBG UZA federal funding. Are there any questions regarding this presentation?
Tony Carfang again from Ward 2. Just want to say thanks for that detail. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Carfang. All right. Hearing no other comments or questions regarding the opportunity here that we've received through the award of the STBG UZA project funding, I would like to now move on to item 3E, or I'll turn it back over in the hands of Mr. McKnight. And I believe we have someone else who will be presenting on item 3E1 trails.
Mr. McKnight, are you there?
Yes, I thought there was going to be another presenter. We are on 3E trails. Who will be our presenter on that item?
Good morning. This is Doug Kemper, Director of Parks and Recreation. Can you hear me okay?
Good morning, Doug.
I just have a quick update. We don't have any slides, so you might go back to whoever's running the slides. We don't have a slides for the trails update. Just so you know, trails under construction. The Overholser Trail is substantially completed. We are working on a punch list to clean that up. Hefner to Overholser Trail is 99% completed. We are waiting on final inspection. I'm sure there will be a few punch list items for that one, but we're happy that that one is finally coming to closure. The South Oklahoma River Trail is 75% completed. Obviously where we have businesses on the riverbank and our trail goes between those businesses and the river, we have to work out some kind of an arrangements for access. And one of those big sections is there behind Dell. So having access to do repaving of the trail system, we have to work out agreements with those businesses. So we are working with Dell to work behind their facility. Trails that are in design is the North Oklahoma River Trail. 70% plans completed. The next one is the Katy Trail resurfacing. And again, that one is also 70% plans completed. We hope to be under constructions with those later this fall, once we get to 100% plans complete. Our wayfinding is coming to a closure. Obviously, when you are creating this many signs, and a lot of those signs are going in parks, and when the city ordinance says that a city park can only have 2 signs, and you're putting in possibly 16, 18 additional signs, you have to get variances from those ordinances. We also have other review committees. When we go through historic areas, the historic preservation get involved. We've got the river corridor, things along those lines. So the plans are functionally done. We just have to get through all the review processes and other organizations that where we are putting signs on their properties. But we hope to be under construction or under bids again this fall. We hope to be actually bidding these projects in October. And then final, the biggie that we consider is the Deep Fork Trail. We're about 60% complete on plans. We hope again to be reviewing those 100% in probably October or November, and going out for bids for Deep Fork sometime after the first of the new year. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but otherwise we recommend that you accept our report.
I would like to say something about the Katy Trail. Chris Dahlgren from Ward 6. I rode the Katy Trail yesterday, and where it crosses 16th Street, there's like not a lot of visibility there, and it felt like a pretty unsafe crossing. So I was wondering if there's any sort of signage or something that can be added at that intersection as the Katy Trail comes to like resurfacing and everything.
As it relates to to all of the trail systems, all of them will receive the same wayfinding systems. And where we have those crossings, we will have signage for bicyclists from both directions coming to those intersections, identifying that they're coming up to an intersection. But we will also take a look at the visibility and the view sheds, and we will get with Mike Clark and the Public Works Transportation folks to see if we can fix some of the side issues. But the trail, all of the trails will be receiving the same wayfinding and the same guidance and marker systems throughout the system. So as soon as we get through those review processes and we go off with bids, all of the trail systems will get those identifiers, and we will have markers as people come up to intersections.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dahlgren, this is Debbie Miller at Public Works. I'll have staff go out and look and see if there's anything we can do in the interim before we do the resurfacing.
Great, thank you.
So this is Sandino Thompson with Ward 7. So I'm happy Chris asked that question, because I had a similar question about that intersection in particular, and then also just sort of what the scope of the resurfacing would look like for the Katy Trail. So I'm not sure if there, what from a design perspective we're able to sort of see, or how far along. It sounds like you guys are pretty close to being complete from a design perspective on that. So I would be kind of curious about what the scope is. So what work's actually going to be done there? Mr. Cumber.
I'm sorry, Mr. Zach. We'll bring that to you at your next meeting. We'll show you what the resurfacing and the repairs will be. We'll get you a list of that.
Okay, thank you. So then my other question, and this is in part just me trying to jog my memory on some of these conversations that we've had over the last couple of years now. And that was, there was some talk about amenities and facilities that may come alongside I think the wayfinding and some of these other things. It sounds like we're going to get into a conversation about excess dollars and how some of those things are used. And then, but I guess I just want to kind of remind myself, or see if the city staff can remind me on where we stood with amenities. So thinking about things like, water fountains, the little stands where you can, the bike repair stands, and then potentially restrooms as well at certain intersections or at certain spots where it might make sense. So I feel like we talked about that maybe a year and a half ago or so, and it was something else that was being considered. So I am curious about the status of us evaluating that, particularly when I think about 16th and the Katy Trail, because of the terminus of that trail, obviously being up by the zoo and the Adventure District. I feel like there are lots of opportunities there, but I think that access point at 16th Street and some of those surrounding communities, though amenities and wayfinding would seem to go a long way towards creating community benefit there. Specifically where I'm familiar, I'm sure there are lots of other trails who could also benefit from some of those things that we had discussed a while back. So Mr. Cupper, if you don't mind, do you have any thoughts or any update on any sort of evaluation about other amenities that might come along on the trails?
Well, we always love the idea of adding those amenities. If you remember, and as you pointed out, it was 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when we started down this pathway for designing. We've had requests for shade structures, restrooms throughout the systems. The West River Trail is a prime example. You are on that trail a great long distance. The Katy Trail, the same thing. We have identified where most of our high purpose trails touch park lands or their parking nodes to identify where we might have water, access to water, because that's going to be a big thing. And obviously, if we put a restroom in, we would put the drinking fountains there as well. Those all have to be planned out. It takes a lot of engineering, a lot of designing to do that, because what happens with water fountains, if you go over 100 yards, the water in that line to that drinking fountain can actually go stagnant if it doesn't get used on a regular basis. So all of that has to be played into it. We would love to have all of our old trails resurfaced, and we've gone a long ways with your funding to do that. And if we didn't have work still to do, we would be asking you for those type of opportunities to look at designing shade structures, look at adding drinking fountains where we have the parking lots now, where they are the stopping point. We would also probably be talking to you, especially on the Katy Trail, about connectors from neighborhoods up to that old railroad corridor, because it's kind of isolated in some locations. It's not neighborhood friendly. You want to be on the Katy Trail to be riding the Katy Trail. So we would also be talking to you about possible connectors from neighborhoods to our main use trails. And Katy Trail would be one of those primary examples where we would want to put connectors down off the trail and into neighborhoods as part of it as well.
So this might be more of a conversation maybe once we, I think, for a separate agenda item where we're talking about excess dollars. And I definitely acknowledge one, so we got one of several parts of the city to consider, and then not a lot of funding. So what I hear you saying though, Mr. Cupper, is that we still have a ways to go on resurfacing what we have and making sure it's in good condition. So we're not sure, or maybe we're sure we will not actually get to a point where we're considering the amenities, some of these other amenities and things that we've talked about.
I think the biggest thing that we would want you to be most concerned with is actually top priority for our cycling community that loves our off-road cycling opportunities is closing those loops.
Yeah.
And we have had those gaps, in the Deep Fork is one of those. The Greenway Trail to connect the river trail systems to the Katy Trail. Those endpoints are of a high priority, because being able to transverse the whole community without technically getting off an off-road trail system is a high priority. So that would be our first suggestion, first priority to y'all, is making sure that we can close those loops. And then if we have resources, then go after those additional assets that are needed: restrooms, shade structures, drinking fountains, bicycle repair stations, and even additional access points to be able to park and get on our trail systems. So you don't have to drive 5 miles or 10 miles to get on a trail. You might find an access point a little closer to home. So that would be where we would suggest, at least Melinda and myself, and some of the planning staff, make sure that we can close those loops first and foremost, and then go on to the amenities.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me be clear. At least from my standpoint, I think it's critical that we sort of be able to complete those loops, which drives me to my last question. I think at least my last question for you guys is, I kind of heard us talk about the general update, but I know there were some questions about both design and then the multiple funding streams and things like that for the Deep Fork trail system. So is there anything else specifically that we know of or that we're waiting on, aside from time, maybe on those connection points? Because my understanding is that we have supplemented that funding with the sales tax funding. We've supplemented where there are other dollars also put aside for the Deep Fork Trail. So is there anything holding us up aside from just the fact that it's a complicated process with several funding sources and frankly some complicated engineering?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I think it's our intent to try to bring back a more comprehensive plan at your next meeting to show you what we're capable of doing with the funding we have, and really, there are new people on your committee, or the Safer Cities Committee, that weren't in on the groundwork of the Deep Fork. We'd like to bring you all up to date to see the alignment and see the complications and talk about final steps for bidding that project. And I believe it's our intent to bring it to you at your next meeting.
All right, thanks. And so I just got one more. This is actually more comment than question, but I think you have the wrong OSU on your mask. We were looking at it for at the beginning of the meeting, and I was trying to figure out what was going on, if I was in the right meeting. So anyway, that's just a heads up, Mr. Cupper. I appreciate your comments and your feedback. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
This is Jason Johnston. I have an unanswerable and a procedural question. Obviously, the Deep Fork Trail is our biggest piece of thing to bite off and try to deal with in this. And so the estimate is that we're at 100% planning finally in November. So do we have any concept of how long it will take to finish that trail? And this is the procedural question. We have been told several times that we're to maintain ourselves as a board until all of our projects over whom we've saved grace are finished. And so are we talking about a commitment to the end of the Deep Fork Trail? Up until now, I thought probably the streetscape projects might be the end of us. But I think the question is, are we going to maintain ourselves as a board clear through the end of the Deep Fork completion?
I'll leave that to either Jeff. I think Jeff might be able to allude to that. You are to stay in position until all the projects are completed. I'm hoping that the Deep Fork can actually be completed before some of the streetscapes, but we'll have to wait and see what the final tally is. And as I said, you'll have a better understanding of what we're facing with the Deep Fork, I believe, next month.
Thank you.
This is Hal McKnight, and just as a clarification, money and funding from Better Streets, Safer City that Doug was talking about is going into resurfacing, which the area around the south part of the Burt Cooper trails on the south part of Lake Hefner, that resurfacing has been complete. Other trails need the same work because they were in bad shape. And also money will go to the signage program, which will include two things: wayfinding, which will give you direction of where you are, where bus stops are, etc., and safety ideas, trail etiquette. Obviously, more people are using our trail system than ever before during this pandemic. So we do have a chance on some of these next items coming up to find extra funding for trails. But I do think that once we get our signage put together on these trails, it's going to certainly educate people and help greatly in the way of safety. Thank you.
Okay, I was going to, this is Jeff Butler, Planning Director. Just in answer, hopefully I can provide additional clarification, Mr. Johnson. So yeah, you're right. The board, needs to stay in place for a while longer. And yeah, it's hard to say whether it will be street enhancement projects or the Deep Fork Trail that will be completed last. But so once this board really is pretty much finished with projects, once you all approve the preliminary reports, there's a chance that we might need to make some adjustments that would rise to the level of changes major enough that you might want to review again. But this group doesn't look at change orders and all that kind of thing as we progress through construction. So really, once something hits a preliminary report stage and you recommend it to the council, I don't want to say you're done, but pretty close for those projects. So it's hard to say when actually the board's work will be done. I'll talk in a minute about the excess collections, but that could play a part of it as well, because we'll be adjusting, because those monies, it takes a while. I'm told even a year or two or more for those to be finalized as the tax commission does its thing. So hopefully that helps a little bit, but the short answer is we're not sure exactly.
You have to understand, I started doing board work when I was 15, and if I go to 75, it'll be 60 years. So I just had some thought I might not live that long the way things are going. So I just had to ask the question.
Well, 75 seems like a good round number.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. Any other
Hey,
comments?
Doug, this is Tony Carfing from Ward 2. I also really appreciate that Chris and Sandino talked about the Katy Trail at 16th. There are some peculiarities about the design, and in particular, as a driver approaching from the west, there's no signage for the crossing. There are a couple of other things, and I'll shoot you an email and copy others with some ideas about how that needs to be improved and how it might be improved.
Thank you. That moves us to item 3F, excess collection distribution.
Okay, this is Jeff again. I'll be covering that. And Mark, if you wouldn't mind putting up the PowerPoint again, we've got a few slides that we can use to cover this. But we discussed this briefly last meeting, so I'll take you through it this time. Eric did last time. He's out on vacation. I guess he and I kind of swapped because I was out last time, so I'm covering this time. We can get that PowerPoint back up here. We'll go ahead and proceed. Looks like we might have a little bit of technical difficulty. So we have beyond our original projection there, you can see on the screen now. We were expecting 240 million. We're north of that by roughly 20 million. And like I said a minute ago, it'll ebb and flow until we get really close to a final number, but it's going to be a little while before that happens. I won't bore you with the details of why that is, unless you want to talk the intricacies of the tax commission and how they work and how revenues are collected. But right now, we would like to go ahead and allocate 18 million. Now, we've got a little bit more than that, but we wanted to save some just in case we actually have to pay some back. Not too likely, but more likely we'll be able to retain some just as a small amount of contingency. So it may be that when Mr. Johnson is 75, we'll be talking about the last $1 million and what to do with it, but hopefully it won't take nearly that long. So the way we went about okay, so we knew we had $18 million to deal with. Well, what should we do with that? It seemed clear to city staff that we didn't, that of course the natural instinct is to look and see, well, how did we spend the money before? Well, the vast majority was spent, not the vast majority, the majority was spent on resurfacing. We didn't feel like we needed to do that. You saw today, in fact, that, we were able to put $9 million back into resurfacing. We think we're okay on resurfacing. So we didn't feel like we needed to spend a huge chunk of money on resurfacing. But we did kind of settle at 5 million that we might want to retain for resurfacing in some fashion. And so we thought, well, we know that we need resurfacing work for these street enhancement projects. And we've come to find out as we've worked on the bicycle projects that nearly all of them require some level of resurfacing. So we thought, well, it makes sense since this money is resurfacing that we split it up into the two categories that require a substantial amount of resurfacing. So that's where you get the proposal that we submitted last month, where we have that 50-50. So take the 5 million, cut it in half and distribute it amongst those two categories. And then the rest of them would just be per the original proportions. So there's the percentages there that you can see. 33% for street enhancements, sidewalks, 17% for trails and bike infrastructure. So if you go to the next slide, Mark, you can see, well, I'll go through the anticipated results. So I talked about the resurfacing already. So we'll go ahead and skip to the next one. Street enhancements, here are the dollar amounts if we go with this recommendation. 6.8 million for street enhancements, sidewalks 4.3, trails 2.1, and bikes 4.6. So next slide, we'll go through these one by one. So for the street enhancement category, we think that that there are a lot of needs. Some of the projects as we've gone through, Northeast 23rd, for example, could use a lot more funds, and there are some others too that probably could in the way of resurfacing and in the related appurtenances that go into that. And then the next one, sidewalks. So our thinking is we could do several more miles of pedestrian priority area sidewalks and a mile or so of additional schools, parks, and transit sidewalks, and a little bit more downtown sidewalks. There was, I believe, 1.2 million for downtown sidewalks, and that project is still in the design phases. But it seems likely that we might need a little bit more for that. The next slide, it talks about trails, and we don't have the. There would be the potential with that $2.1 million for some new projects. We could also use it on existing. We had a little discussion a minute ago about the amenities. MAPS 4 includes 8 million for connectivity for trails, but it's specific to connectivity to Lake Stanley Draper and the Oklahoma River in South OKC, as well as trail amenities. fountains, signage, bathrooms, shade, etc. So there's a little bit in maps 4, and there's a little bit left under this proposal with this money. And then finally, the last slide in this section would be the bike infrastructure category. And we don't have a mileage necessarily here. It kind of depends on the type of facility, but we do anticipate we'd be able to have the resurfacing needs met. You're all aware by now that every time we go into a bike facility, it feels like when you go and look at and drive these and you ride them that they need I don't want to say a higher level of service than your normal street, but they're often if you have a car and you're driving on your suspension and your soft rubber tires, you don't really notice the things that you do if you're a cyclist. So we've become more sensitive to the needs of the resurfacing for those roads because they tend to get in worse condition on the sides of the roads. And so we feel like with this, we'll be able to make those improvements and have the funds necessary to do that. And that concludes my kind of summary of this proposal. So I'm happy to take questions and we can discuss whatever we need to do.
Jeff, let me ask you a question. We have 2 items that require a vote. One with the excess collections, which you were talking about, the 18 million on where those dollars should go according to what our board would recommend. And then an implementation plan, which also requires a vote. Where we are right now is for us to try and recommend where this $18 million is allocated. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Well, I can just say that, in our past, our multi-use trails have stood for health and wellness and a way to get around our city without using an automobile. This year, our trails have become a lifestyle for millions of our residents. Our trail system is being used more than ever before. Try and find another MAPS program that has benefited the health of so many in this time of need. I think we're truly blessed with this $18 million to spend and reinvest in our city. And I would love to recommend to the city council where these dollars can go into these 4 categories of trails, sidewalks, bicycle structures, and streetscapes, but with a high priority on trails, because MAPS 4 is only going to have 8 million, and those dollars are already dedicated. I'd love to see out of this, if I did the math on this, I'd want to see, of course, money put out of the 19 plus million, $1 million put in reserve, 3 million to sidewalks, 2 million to streetscapes, 3 million to bicycle infrastructure, and I'd love to see $10 million go into trails, which we so greatly need. We do not have amenities and there's no money for that at this time. And since we have this money left over and have found how popular our trail systems have become, not just to individuals, but to whole families, our board, I'm encouraging to fund these trails with $10 million of this. I know the citizens that we represent would be extremely appreciative. Thank you.
Jeff, could you put up the slide with the allocations again? The percentages, the dollars.
Would you like the dollars or the percentages? We've got a slide, 1 of each. You can show the dollars at slide 1. There are the dollars.
Right. I think this will do. Okay. Now, it's one of those things. I was thinking about street enhancements. When you consider the state of our economy, and the street enhancements tend to help develop commercial interests in the areas of the city, as we have seen area by area enhanced with this kind of funding. I live close to the plaza. And so you see how this really benefits the community and the business. And at this point in time, it seems like that's an area that's going to really need all the help it can get as we try to rebuild ourselves through a year that we hope to all forget, 2020. So I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I think I don't know if the amount is correct or not, but I see the importance of the street enhancements as far as business development is concerned.
If I can jump in real quick before we dive too deep on this allocation, just as a clarifying question, I know Lakeisha mentioned some potential trail enhancements being eyed from Sooner near 59th and then from Air Depot. Would that come out of the Service Transportation Block Grant elements that it's partially for the 59th Street bike lane? Or would that be potential here or something from Act 4? What are their thoughts for those projects?
We do not have a funding source. Let's see, I believe Sooner we had an original, we do have, sorry, 1 second. We do not have a funding source identified yet for the Sooner project. I believe we did consider submitting it for the, we did submit it for the SDBG funds, and it was considered in the 2023 federal fiscal year, and it was knocked out. It was second project in that submittal, and it got knocked out by an Edmond project. So we could resubmit it for SDBG funding, but it would need a match, and it would likely need to be sales tax. It could possibly be sales tax funding to be used for that match. I don't believe we have anything identified yet, but it would either be bond or sales tax that would be used for the match for that project if it were to be selected when we resubmit it. Does that answer your question, Mr. Carpang?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to just comment that I agree with Chairman McKnight regarding considering the reallocation with an emphasis on trails. I think looking long-term to his point about MAPS 4 funding and potential future funding to expand the trail system, there doesn't seem to be a lot of opportunity guaranteed in the future to put more money into trails. So I agree with him, honestly, that considering a reallocation of $3 million to sidewalks, $2 million to streetscapes, $3 million to bicycle infrastructure, and $10 million to trails is something that should be considered by the board. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, I would actually like to move that we vote on considering that allocation or reallocating it per your recommendation.
May I say something? I'm Chris Dahlgren from Ward 6. So I love the trails here. I think they're amazing. And I do want to see continuation of improving them. However, I do feel like trails are really used by like the more affluent people in our community who are biking for recreation. And I would recommend putting more of the funds into bike infrastructure so that we can make sure that there is a safe way for people who are biking because they don't have any other option to get around our city. So, yeah.
Well, I think Jeff made a motion. Is there a second to his motion?
I'd like to discuss it more before we go into that motion.
Sure.
So just to add on to Chris's point, so Oklahoma City's trail system is fantastic. We have, 110 miles of paved off-street trail right now. I grew up in Chicago, and Chicago has about 25 miles. So we far exceed the recreational capacity of a much larger, much richer city. So I just want to throw that out there. And then as far as the point of just how far trails have come and what they've done for the health of the city, like Hal said, yeah, a lot of people using it. I think 1.4 million users in a given year. That's amazing and so much better than it was before Maps 2, Maps 3. So it's been phenomenal. I love to see the progress, and of course, more people on bikes recreationally carries over into considerate driving behaviors from those more people biking. I'm just having that new perspective. So I do very much value that. The big point, though, is that putting so much money into building a great trail system proves that if you build it, they will come. So if instead we love the fact that we have 110 miles of bike trail, so another 70, 80 miles more than Chicago and most cities in the country. If we then spend time on building safe on-street infrastructure that serves commuters, it can also serve recreational riders. The fact that we don't have many bike commuters proportionally to other major cities is because of that lack of infrastructure. And if we fund it, I think we would see a similar increase in bike commuting, a little bit less car dependency, and that would increase the health benefits that Chairman McKnight was talking about. So I really appreciate the logic behind the city's proposed allocation here.
Anthony, this is Hal McKnight. Certainly appreciate that. Yes, the survey that was done in 2018 showed 1.4 million on the Burt Cooper trails alone, not the citywide trail system. And I just think that it's common sense, bicycle structure is going to get $20 million in Maps 4. I think that's wonderful, but Oklahoma City is not Chicago. We have people that are using our trail systems that we have built right now more than anyone ever anticipated, probably 4 or 5 times more than what we had in 2018. And there's a strong need to connect these trails, as Doug Cupper was saying, and this is our opportunity. Put doctors in. People use our trails for commuting. Although in this day and age, who knows how many people are going to be commuting to work, since people are pretty well working from home. If that continues, our trails are going to be even more stressed than they are right now. Any further discussion?
Hal, I would just add, this is Jeff in Ward 3. I do agree with Tony and Chris, and I appreciate their comments regarding bicycle infrastructure. The one thing I would note about trails, I'm being a representative of Ward 3 and then our neighboring Ward 5, there is 110 miles of trails throughout the city, but to Hal's point, we need connectivity. And in Ward 3 and Ward 5, we're grossly underserved by the trail system with no connectivity at all. And secondly, I would say that I'm all for bicycle infrastructure, but as what we've seen, what occurred when the trail system was funded and expanded, it starts in a central area and then spokes out, and it takes years, going on 20 years, to even get access in South Oklahoma City. And I'm afraid if we don't take the opportunity to put money into trails now, there's not going to be additional funds guaranteed in the future like bicycle infrastructure has. And I think the bicycle infrastructure investment, particularly over the next many years, is going to be solely focused on downtown. And that's not a bad thing, because a system has to be created. But to Mr. McKnight's point, we have money that's going to be allocated in Maps 4 for that, and potential other funding sources that are out there that are not necessarily guaranteed for trails. And I know we can't guarantee that Ward 3 or Ward 5 would see any of that money for the trails. I do think overall that connectivity is important and something we should consider.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, so I have a couple of I think comments and thoughts about this. So there are a few things, because I do think so we have to give a recommendation to the city. I think the recommendation, obviously, if we look at previous recommendations, will carry quite a bit of weight. And I do think it's very important to sort of consider what the impact of this sales tax program in the bigger picture of the other activities that are taking place. So that being said, I'm a fan of doing something more for trails than them perhaps getting the lesser proportion that's sort of proposed here. I think the methodology that got us here was pretty sound, but I do think in context, if we look ahead, we know that there's going to be a lot both of attention and other resources put into some of these other areas. But I think the one thing that, and I also think that it's something to be said for the connectivity that Mr. Groves talked about as well, and the connectivity around the city that the trails have the opportunity to provide. So there's a couple of things. One is just a little bit of clarity about what these resources would actually be able to fund and support. And I know we can't get way far down deep into sort of the details until we sort of approve some kind of allocation. But what's not really very clear to me is like what $4.6 million of bicycle infrastructure, what $2 million in trails, or 4.3 in sidewalks, or 6.8 in street enhancements, what that necessarily buys. And my last part about this, which is maybe going to sort of throw a cog in this, is that very, very similar to what Mr. Johnston said, the one thing that I can say, so I think this whole program has been, very well thought out, a great partnership between our sort of feedback as citizens and stakeholders and the city in thinking about how to guide these dollars. But I really am also very cognizant of the current circumstances we're in, and it has really heightened for me, particularly the importance of street enhancements. So I'm sort of not inclined necessarily to make a wholesale reduction in street enhancements, because I do think that the street enhancements that we're talking about, and particularly the ones that some of the ones that are in design now, have a huge potential to provide some resiliency and some opportunity for communities that have been really hard hit by this pandemic, and businesses and commercial corridors that will struggle. And I also don't know that MAPS 4 is going to do anything to necessarily address those things and those issues and those resources either. So I'm a little reluctant, particularly because I know how much the street enhancements are being looked at as an opportunity and a catalyst in my ward, but also in some other areas to really push some commercial activity. I'm a little reluctant to slash that allocation significantly. I don't know if that's something that I could support, for example. So I do think that generally, I think trails I think this is an opportunity similar to what we talked about years ago to really set a good precedent for trails, to really set a good course for them. And I do think that they are likely to be funded at less of a level as some of these other areas in the future. At the same time, I think that street enhancements in particular are going to play a pivotal role in protecting and giving some of these commercial districts and some parts of the community a fighting chance for being able to sort of survive and recover from the pandemic. So I just think those are things we have to sort of consider.
Thank you.
I'll just add one more thing to this discussion, specifically talking about recreational cyclists enjoying the trail. I totally agree that connectivity is essential. There are a number of subdivisions around Lake Hefner where the only option for that neighborhood, even though there are houses within 100 yards of the trail, their only option is to drive out to Northwest Expressway and go all the way around in order to get on the trail. So that means people, if they want to use the trail, either throw their bike over the fence and huff it, or pack their bike in their car and drive to the trail. Now, there are recreational cyclists who are fairly confident riders, and that has consequences. Specifically with Lake Hefner, last August, a rider was riding home after training at Lake Hefner and was hit by a police officer and killed. A few weeks ago, another woman was riding home after training at Lake Hefner. She was biking home and was hit by a car where she suffered 2 broken vertebrae and a fractured femur and knee damage, as well as a concussion. So just building new trails and demanding that people drive there to use them, not everybody's going to drive there to use them. Some of them are still going to risk their lives on roads getting there. So I'm still heavily focused on good connectivity in the best way that we can achieve that. If we can put greenways all throughout the city, fantastic. Our money, especially right now, doesn't necessarily go that far. And so I'm looking for the best bang for the buck to impact the most number of people to safely bike. And I think this allocation is in the right direction.
This is Hellman. And yeah, there's
I was
certainly a lot
going
of
to ask
cycles.
Jeff to repeat his numbers again. You would? Or you, I guess it was your numbers, Hal, Jeff's proposal.
Well, no, Jeff was trying to make a motion, but I'm sorry.
You were cutting out, Hal. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
You had started would you repeat your numbers that you were starting the motion, that you had in your motion?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Hal. Thanks, Steve. The motion included 3 million for motion to consider reallocating funds as follows: 3 million for sidewalks, 2 million for streetscapes, 3 million for bicycle infrastructure, and 10 million on trails.
Steve, did that answer your question?
Yes, and I don't know if we need to compromise on that or vote and start over, or you tell me how to proceed. I guess we've not heard a second.
What would you, as far as a compromise, Steve, what would your thoughts be?
Well, certainly hear a lot of support for streetscapes and bicycle infrastructure. Don't hear anybody supporting sidewalks. So it certainly looks like there's some dollars we could take from that off of the city's recommendation. I agree with certainly you and Jeff and others that trails have no other source of funding, and if we don't give them a lot here, it may be a while before they get dollars again, where street enhancements and bicycle infrastructure will have opportunities for additional funding. But I agree with others' thoughts that those are quite important to the city and making it grow and thrive.
What if we looked at an allocation of $8 million for trails and reduce sidewalks? I think that's true. A couple of us feel that the street enhancements are pretty significant to recovery, and I think the business people in the group would appreciate that. And though we understand about bicycle infrastructure, the one thing about comparing us to Chicago is we were once the largest land area city in the world. And so even though we have more miles, we have a lot more city as well. So I don't know. I mean, I'd sort of go with maybe an allocation of $8 million for trails and see how we could divide the rest up.
Jason, if you did that, if you put 8 million into trails and say 6.8 for street enhancements, that would drop sidewalks to 1 million and bicycle infrastructure would be 2.2. Both sidewalks and bicycle infrastructures are getting a lot of money in MAPS 4, so they certainly would have opportunities in the future. But if what you're talking about would be a 6.8 for street enhancements, 1 million for sidewalks, multi-use trails would get 8 million, and bicycle infrastructure would get 2.2.
That's one way to cut up the pie.
Jeff, would you amend your motion to those numbers?
Sure. Can you repeat those? I apologize. I didn't write those down.
Street enhancement, 6.8, sidewalks, 1 million, trails, 8 million, and bicycle infrastructure would be 2.2, which that would be that's the 18 million, not counting the money that would be 1 point something in reserve.
Okay. So Mr. Chairman, I'll move that the motion be amended by adding the following, revising the numbers that I originally stated. Make it 1 million for sidewalks, 6.8 for street enhancement or streetscapes, 2.2 million for bicycle infrastructure, and 8 million for trails.
Thank you.
I would second that motion.
All right, thank you. It has been moved and seconded. I guess we need to do a roll call vote, please.
Yes, sir, I'm here. Mr. McKnight,
Aye.
Mr. Johnston,
Aye.
Mr. Taylor still isn't with us. Mr. Carfang,
Nay.
Mr. Groves,
Aye.
Jim Blue,
Aye.
Ms. Dahlgren, Ms. Dahlgren,
Sorry, nay.
Thompson,
Aye.
Mr. Noble. You're on mute. Can you unmute?
Aye.
There you go. Thank you. Mr. Dixon.
Aye.
The motion passes with 2 no votes.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, board. Next is item 3E, information plan.
Yes, Mr. McKnight, this is Mike Clark again. The August 2020 implementation plan would include the additional allocation of 1.7.
Michael,
Yes,
this
ma'am.
is Francis. I'm sorry. That was just a motion on the amendment. We now need to adopt the resolution as amended.
I'm sorry, Francis.
I'm sorry. Thank you. So can I have a motion to adopt the, to recommend the resolution to council as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Second, Steve Dixon.
Thank you. Mr. McKnight,
Aye.
Mr. Johnston,
Aye.
Mr. Carfang,
Nay.
Mr. Groves,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Dahlgren,
Nay.
Thompson,
Aye.
Mr. Thompson,
Aye.
Mr. Noble,
Aye.
and Mr. Dixon.
Aye.
The resolution was adopted as amended. Thank you.
And that last item, Francis, was 3G, correct? 3G1?
Yes, the motion was on F1, on that resolution adopting excess collection.
Yes, ma'am.
Now we're on to item G, the implementation plan.
Okay.
And Mr. McKnight, the August 2020 implementation plan will include the additional allocation of 1.7 million in the PR1 budget in the residential resurfacing category.
And Mike, this requires another vote, correct?
Yes, sir. It would receive the updated plan and it would recommend adoption to the city council.
Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Steve Dixon, I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call vote. McKnight,
Aye.
Johnston,
Hey,
Carfane,
Aye.
Groves,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Dahlgren,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Noble,
Aye.
Dixon.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Next item is 4, financial report.
And Mr. McKnight, I'm not sure if our finance department's on the call or not, but the report that they provided was.
I'm here. I'm
Hey,
sorry.
Eric, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I was muted. My fault. But Erica Vanderslipen with the budget office. And I just wanted to go over the financial summary as of July 24th, 2020. Total to date for the program, we collected $260.2 million. We have expenditures to date of $94.7 million, with current allocations totaling $238 million. And this information is as of July 24th, the specific date. And as Mr. Butler mentioned earlier, that we'll continue to see some small variations in this for a little bit as different adjustments and everything come in on the final sales tax numbers.
We have here flow.
Total today also, I just wanted to mention over the projected sales tax, we exceeded by 14.7 million. That coupled with almost 5 million in interest on the funds is where we're getting to the 19.7 million in excess collections. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Erica? This does require a vote.
I move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and approved and seconded.
McKnight,
Aye.
Johnston, Mr. Johnston. I guess he left the room. He'll be considered absent. Carfang,
Aye.
Groves,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Dahlgren,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Noble,
Aye.
and Dixon.
Aye.
Approved unanimously.
Thank you. Next item, number 5, director's reports.
This is Jeff. I don't have anything else to report other than to say thank you all for your participation today in the deliberation. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Otherwise, thank you.
Any questions for Jeff?
This is Tony
Thank
from
you,
Ward
Jeff.
2.
Oh, right.
I think at the last meeting, Mr. Wenger talked to the fact that guidelines for lane allocations was based on ACOG guidelines, which is, I think, 4 lanes at any, sorry, 4 lanes is considered for roads that have an ADT above 10,000, which is not in line with FHWA guidelines. What would be the process to revisit that policy?
Mr. Carpeng, this is Debbie Miller in Public Works. Eric is out of the office this week, but when he gets back, we can reach out to you and schedule a meeting to discuss. If that would be okay.
Oh, you're muted, Tony. Oh,
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
And Debbie, I seem to recall, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 12,000 was ACOG's number, was the threshold, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you're right, Tony. There is, depending on whether you're going by FHWA or ACOG or, you know, various other cities have a, seems like every city has their own guidelines. But yeah, so it can be tricky, and it depends on what everybody's comfortable with in a given location in terms of the amount of, you know, I guess the level of service, I guess, people expect on a street.
And just to add for your awareness, Mr. Butler, I'm in conversations with Senator Kerry Hicks and Secretary Tim Gatz about the value and importance of consistency. So like you mentioned, INCOG has a very different profile for street allocations. Shawnee, Ponca City, all of them are different from Oklahoma City. And so in terms of what drivers expect as they move through the state, as far as expertise that contractors need to have on policy, depending on where their projects are, there's the aspect of unifying something throughout the state to streamline costs for construction, for contractor expertise, as well as safety and expectations in the public. So I just have those conversations ongoing at the state level, and happy to talk at the city level as well.
Who's our chair?
I think we lost both our chair and co-chair.
Ms. Kersey, it seems like we don't have a chair or co-chair connected.
Yes, I understand. So as secretary, we are now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.